And so this is my co-host. If you see her now, I am getting shy. Yeah, you can see her at the corner right here. Her name is Skylar. I've had her for a year now. Legit my best friend. And my daughter, like both. To the point where they pinned him down to the floor, yelled at him. I was like, "You effing idiot!" And I'm literally just standing in a pool of my own blood. And they're saying to the blood that was there that it was due to a nosebleed because it was the middle of the summer. Two women opened the front door to this house, one of them being my mom. I shit you not, I did not know who was my mom. It's part of the reason why I want to do this. I want to give my life as a roadmap. Hey everybody, welcome to the second episode of the I Am podcast. Um, so this is going to be an introduction video. A lot to get through, and I'm actually low-key excited to talk to everybody about it. So this is going to be more of an introduction video on myself, a little background information, because this all leads up to why I wanted to start doing this and why it resonates with me so much, and why I think I would have an easy time doing this, and it's something that I truly do enjoy. So to get into it, a little background information. In 1997, when my mom was walking out of her apartment, she had a roommate. This guy, as soon as she's walking out, and her job was close enough where she could walk towards it, and which she was doing. She was walking out of her apartment, and John, my father, was driving by, and he saw a very attractive woman. So he was trying to talk to my mom, try to go out with her and all that. And by the time she got to her job, she was, "Oh, I have to go to work," basically declining him. And then later that night, she gets home from work, and she hears really loud music in the outside. And funny enough, she goes out, peeks through her window, and sees John there. And he's playing. I had to look it up and listen to it. I remember this song playing all the time growing up with John. It was "In a Dream" by Rockwell, and so he was playing that, and literally like the old school rom-com romance movies or shows, he has a boombox and he's playing it outside her house, serenading her. My mom is like freaking out, and she's like, she tells her roommate to come over, and they both see it, and she's like, "Oh, tell him I'm not here." So the roommate goes down, talks to him, and says that she's not here. So he ends up leaving, and so the next day everything seems normal. She walks to work, everything's cool, and then he walks through the doors of her job. Now she can't go anywhere because she's at work. He's talking to her, trying to get her to go out, and so they end up going out, and she um, finally cracks, and she goes out with him. A year later, they're married, and they have me. And then 2 years after that, my sister is born, my younger sister. And on side note, my mom has had a kid with someone else before me, which is my older brother, with a different guy, and she got custody of him, of my brother Nick. And so she goes. So fast forward back to when my sister was born, they end up divorcing about, I would say, a year or two later, or about that time frame, due to the fact that he was very abusive. And I can't remember any of it when I was that young. Um, and at this time, I was super young to even like recognize. Hate to admit, but to even recognize my own mom when I got much older. And there's a reason I say it like that. So they get a divorce. My father gets custody of me, and my sister gets custody, or my mom gets custody of my sister. So every other weekend or every weekend, I would go over to my mom's house, and then vice versa. My sister would go over to John's house, and that's how they had done it for a very long time. Um, until one day, like I even remember being very young. The earliest memory I have of doing that is my older brother. He's like 3 years older than me. He had a race car bed. Every little boy's dream to have a race car bed. He had a race car bed. I remember my mom had given me a leapfrog pad. It was basically, it had like learning games on it and everything. And I remember being obsessed with that. Um, and it was almost around Halloween, so I remember my mom giving me a Batman costume. So I was going to be Batman that year, with both parents, um, in a way. So that was my Batman origin story. Um, and she had a really nice. She had a house basically. I remember the attic where she had like storage and stuff, and she also had her room had movies, a whole collection of movies, and a big TV. And I remember we used to watch movies and stuff. Me and my sister, she'd always be following us around because she's younger and she has two older brothers, so she'd always be following us around. Eventually, um, John started dating. He started dating this woman named Mindy, um, and she also had two kids with a prior person, but he had custody of them. So what ends up happening is while they're dating, um, one day when he has right vegetation rights, and my sister comes to our house to spend time with us, he decides to leave. And at this time, we also had a dog named Shaggy who had a sister named Snow White who was under the care of my uncle. So what ends up happening is we give Shaggy away, which even at a young age I remember was very heartbreaking. I still remember it was at a gas station, and John had told me that these were the original owners who had bred Shaggy and his siblings, and they were giving it back. And I remember bawling that day. Um, then what ended up happening is we moved. My father, John, he took me, my sister, and Mindy and just moved to a different state. Think so. At that time, we were living in PA. We moved to West Virginia, and I still remember those nights where we would go to the beach every night, um, and stuff like that. Get so many mosquito bites. It was the worst thing, and it was like this. What we used was, if I remember correctly, if it's still in production, this thing called Camel Lotion. It was a pink bottle that you'd put on mosquito bite and stop the itching. That happened a lot. And I don't think I was even in kindergarten yet at that time. And so what ends up happening is we stayed there for a few months. Then we moved to Ohio. Um, and yeah, we moved to Ohio, stayed there for about a year. Then we moved to, what is it, Colorado. And that's where Mindy's mom was at the time, lived at the time. Um, and John was not a terrible person because there are certain things that he did that was very fatherly, such as back in Colorado. I remember it was all the kids were playing, and I don't know why, but I was playing with freaking flip flops on, and we are playing tag with the other kids. And what ended up happening was there was this giant piece of wood in the middle of the grass. I seem to have very bad incidents with random objects in the middle of all grass. Um, and there was a nail sticking out, and I didn't see it. So when I stepped on the piece of wood, the nail went straight through my foot. I remember John literally taking the shirt that he had on, ripping it in half to tie it around my foot to put pressure on the bleeding. End up in the hospital. The doctor said I was very lucky because if it was like this close to my foot bone, that if it would have went, I could have, it would have hit bone, which that sounds super painful. um, and so heals over time. I don't have a scar, sadly. I think that would have been so cool to have a scar. Um, so we live in Colorado for a few years. We meet this guy named Robert. Um, and another reason why uh, my mom had divorced my father, besides him being abusive, which I believe she found out much later on, he was a very heavy drug addict. He, I remember like on drives, he used him and Mindy because they were both drug addicts. Used to put used to smoke. I think it was crack right in front of us in the car all the time. Numerous times actually. I still remember I would be in the back seat with my sister, and they would smoke. Um, yeah, that was not very good times because at the time, it's like back then I knew what was going on, but I didn't. I just knew that it was bad. And obviously, in school, you start to learn more and more as you get older and you start putting two and two together. Um, but during that time, we also, Mindy and John, then had a daughter, Maria. And hopefully, if this reaches a lot of people, which I'm hoping it does eventually in the future, that Maria Rivera, if she ever hears this, or if you're listening to this now, I would love nothing but for you to contact me. She was born March 12th, 2007 in Ohio. I remember that day. I remember me, John, and Destiny running through the hospital to find Mindy's room. I remember the day she came home. My grandmother from John's side came over that. We named her after John's mother, Maria. So it was Maria Rivera. Um, which one of my aunts was also pregnant at the time. She was pissed about that because they were going to have a daughter and she wanted to do that and name it after her mother. Funny. So what ended up, I remember that day very well. It was a blizzard outside. Um, and if that chewing, that's my co-host whenever she wants to decide to pop up. That's her chewing on one of her toys. But yes, I remember that day very vividly. It was snowing outside, and my school at that time had their school bird was the scarlet bird, a red bird, the Ohio State bird. I think it was the scarlet, which happened to be my high school much years later. Um, so I remember the scarlet bird was outside our window the day she was brought back, and every time I see that bird, I associate it with my younger sister Maria. Um, and yeah, for years we moved around a lot. Um, we moved to Colorado. Met a guy named Robert. He stayed with us for a while, who also did drugs as well. That's where I learned to play Yu-Gi-Oh. I got really into it as a kid. Um, yeah, really into it. Then we moved back to Pennsylvania to live with my grandmother um, at that time. Then we moved to New York, which I lived with my uncle and my cousin, and that's where I learned how to cook pancakes from my aunt, which that's what my tia. That's what I call my any of the significant others of my actual blood related uncles or um, tias. I call them Tio or Tia because to me they're still family. And she taught me how to make pancakes. That was the first thing I ever learned how to cook. Um, that's also how I got really good in math because my cousin at the time was in college and we weren't going to school at the time. So he was teaching us everything he was learning. And I'm not in school at this time. I'm getting homeschooled basically. And I am not even in like the third or fourth grade and I'm learning college level math. Um, which helped out a lot later down in the line during high school. Um, to the point where like I remember we took our final. I missed one question on the final test, and the girl next to me, I remember her, really smart girl. She got 100% and the extra credit, and I had only missed one question. I will tell you, I was pissed at myself, but it did help. So learning there, and then we moved back to PA. to live with my grandmother. And during that time, I remember having to take care of both my sisters, um, and living with my grandmother. There, she had a spare room. It would be me and my sister one bed, and then my little sister Maria in her like crib. And I would take care of both of them. I would make them. I remember making the milk for her to sleep, trying to soothe her so she would go to sleep. Um, and um, John and Mindy had disappeared. It had been about 2 to 3 weeks before they came back, and um, at some point, I just stopped asking when they were coming back. Um, they had When they did come back, they took Maria with them, and then disappeared for another 2 to 3 weeks. Then randomly picked me and my sister Destiny up. Um, and he was extremely abusive. The drugs only made it worse because in that household at that time before they left, I remember we were living in the basement. Um, and what ended up happening was, um, I don't know, him and Mindy got in an argument. Mindy was holding my little sister Maria, and he started choking her out. I got worried, so I grabbed Maria from her arms, gave Maria to Destiny, my younger sister, and ran upstairs to get other adults, and they were able to break it up. Um, yeah, and that was a few months after when we went to go see um, Mindy and John when they finally came back. Um, Maria had a burn on her arm, and they had said that she had fell on the heater of the house and burned her arm. And I remember what was going through my mind, and I had told them, like, you guys have to watch over her. Like, I'm not even in the third or fourth grade, and I'm basically having to grow up much faster than anybody else. um and I remember going through that and telling them that, and they're like blowing it off, like, oh no, it's okay, she's fine now, all this and that. And that's when I started learning. And my grandmother, during the time that they were gone, had asked me specifically, what was it that John and Mindy were doing? Like, were they basically hinted at them doing drugs, and I explained what they were doing, not knowing what it was called. I just knew it was something bad, and later to learn that it was crack. Um, and so at that time, I'll get into that later. Trying to like keep everything up to date and go not skip in time frames. So after the burn incident, we started living with John and Mindy again. Um, then what was it? John finally got a house. Then the incident happened where he choked out Mindy, and then that same week, she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna pick up Jay, which is my nickname, and Destiny from school, from the bus stop," and um, she was never there that day. That's when she had literally just up and left. So that was years ago, back when I was in like third or fourth. I was in third grade, and I remember that. And yeah, both her and Maria were both gone. That's when John decided to tell us that she wasn't our mother, and I knew that. I had one memory of my mom, which is what I explained: the Batman suit and the leapfrog pad. So then we went to then um, my great great grandmother had passed away a few months or a few years later. Um, and around that time, my sister also got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Um, yeah, which honestly I think is a surprise. She was very much in shape. She ate so much better than me. Um, and I was fat back then. I was really fat. I was in third, fourth grade at 136 pounds. So yeah, I don't know how, but it seemed to run in my family, especially on the women's side. Um, so when my great great grandmother had passed, he had met an old girlfriend of his, Swaley, and she and them started talking, ended up together. We moved to a house in Pennsylvania. I was still going to the same school, just different bus. Um, that's where I went to no, elementary school. And then, he was still doing drugs at that time. He was still very abusive. Swaley and my sister Destiny got really close together. Um, and what is it? Yeah, I was jealous of that relationship between them, to be honest, because even when doing certain things, like we play Call of Duty on the PlayStation 3, um, we play a 2v1, me versus them, I would always win, even with a 2v1. To the point where like they had developed such a good relationship where they did everything together, talked together, all of that. Where I was literally they would be playing on the PlayStation. I'd be like, "Hey guys, can I play with you?" And they're like, "Oh no, we don't want to play with you." Straight up told me, um, all the honesty in the world. And what was it? Yeah, and so I resented them, and I did feel super alone. Um, and then we got a dog, and this is super important. We got a dog named Susie. It was a pit bull. She was all white, but near the tail on the back end, she had a black spot that within that black spot was a brown spot. Um, Literally became my best friend where I would be nights where I was really sad. I would literally be outside in our porch singing Talking to the Moon by Bruno Mars with her on the porch with me. And also as cringe as this may be at such a young age, because I had the Walkman. And for you that don't know, Walkman is where you have a CD player, put it in, slap that baby in, close it, push play, and have headphones, just like the wired headphones at that. And I'd also be singing and playing "Born for This" by Justin Bieber, and CD, so very limited to certain music. Um, and so yeah, that was literally my best friend. Um, and it got so bad at my house that at times, um, and I didn't talk to anybody to about this besides my dog Susie, because of the fact I knew I was scared that if I talked to somebody about it and other people found out, that um, we'd be taken away from the house, because my grandmother from John's side also put it in my head that if I told anybody, that's what would happen. I would be taken away. Me and my sister would be separated to a foster home. Both my sisters, and so I never did anything about it. I never talked to anybody about it until um, it got so bad in the house. I actually wanted to end it all. I thought about either running away or ending it all, just at the throat, and it be done. I remember wanting to run away, um, but what always stopped me was Susie, because I knew that if I ended it, no one would take care of her. I legit would wake up at 5 a.m., feed the dog, wake everybody else up, walk her, make breakfast for me and my sister, and wake her up to get ready for school, and we would go to school. And I do the same thing while doing homework and all that at night, doing that. Um, and what is it? And so this is my co-host. If you see her now, I am getting shy about it. Yeah, you could see her at the corner right here. Her name is Skylar. I've had her for a year now. Legit my best friend. Um, and my daughter, like both. So going back into what is it? Oh, so yeah, Susie was legit my best friend, same as Skylar, but when I was much younger. Um, and what ended up happening was I never did any of that, because who would take care of Susie? And then me running away, I thought about bringing her, but I was worried about feeding her and how I would be able to feed her and all that. And so I literally just like, okay, I'll stay here, tough it out, and see what comes. So that happened, and the abuse and the drug use still happened. It got back to such a bad point where one time, this is the incident that changed everything. That um, it was all of us. It was me, Destiny, John, Swaley, and Susie on the front porch. We're all talking. Things seem actually good for once, and all three of them are like, "Oh, we should get rid of Susie," and I'm like, "Nah." I was like, "No, you're not." And they're like, "Yeah, she would be probably in a, uh, it would be probably a better home than staying here." I was like, "No, we're not getting rid of her because in my childlike mindset, I knew it would probably be better for her, but to me, it's like I could not lose that. That was the only thing tethering me down. That was giving me a sense of purpose to live, to tough this out. It was the only thing that I felt happy that gave me some sense of happiness or joy while living in that house. And John was like, "Yeah, we're getting rid of her." And I was like, "You guys are not getting rid of her at all." And I'm not even in, I'm in like, what, fifth, sixth grade at this time, right? No, I was like fifth, fourth grade. And they're like, "No, you're not." And I was like, I was like, "No, you're not getting rid of her." And obviously John did not like that, um, going back and arguing. So he got super pissed off, and he opened the door from the balcony and let her out. And she's a puppy at this time, so she wants to run around, play around, and we've had incidents where she's running around, and we live in the woods in PA, so like she could run and get lost, and we might not ever see her again. So I got super scared. I yelled at him. I was like, "You effing idiot!" Um, and I was able to get her. She didn't run very far. She ran like a few feet away, and she came back, and I got her. Brought her back inside. But from that time, when I brought her in, John just grabbed me, and it was about 10 to 15 feet from the front entrance of the door to my room. And from the front entrance to my room, he just kept hitting me in the face, open palm, and put me in my room for disrespecting him, for calling him an idiot. Um, so what ended up happening is I'm just standing there in my room. I saw a very vivid memory, core memory, um, and my nose is bleeding, and I'm literally just standing in a pool of my own blood from my nose, crying, looking down because I didn't want blood to get on my clothes. So I'm just hanging my head over and allowing it to drip on the floor, where it surrounded my feet and everything. And my sister, I wish she never did this, came into my room, started freaking out because of all the blood and everything. And while John and Swaley are still outside, um, they, what is it? Oh, she goes outside, starts crying, and like very loudly. We still have neighbors, even though we live in the woods. Very loudly saying, "Oh my God, JJ is bleeding, all this and that," and crying. And that sets John off again. Then he does the exact same thing to her. Um, and what was it? That night, Swaley had, eventually I go clean myself up and clean up all the blood and everything. That night, Swaley had called her brother, which weirdly enough, through the family tree, is not John, is John's brother, but Swaley and him are not related. Like, it is distinct enough where they're not related, but they have the same brother. Um, so what ends up happening? My cousin and hit my uncle, my Theo, come, and they're saying that they're gonna take Swaley and all that. He's not allowing that, and he gets super like aggressive. They, to the point where they pin him down to the floor. Swaley takes me and Destiny across the street to call the cops from our neighbor's phone. And so the cops come. He's taken out the house uh, for about a week. Within that week, He did come visit, saying that he was sorry for everything and all that. And this isn't the first time me and Destiny hear this. At least on my end, from what I know, I didn't believe him. I've heard it so many times I don't believe it. Um, and that's that's why I'm very big on actions speak louder than words because of situations like that. So what ends up happening then is a week later the cops come again, and they're like, "Hey, we contacted your mom. You're gonna start living with her, and she lives in Jersey, New Jersey." Um, and what ends up then, I was like, "Oh, they're telling us we had to move that day." And so they're like, pack a bag of clothes and we're taking you to Jersey. These are cops. His name was Sergeant Rilla. He still, um, he was a sergeant, and he still told us, I still remember him. Um, he came all the way from Jersey to pick us up. And so told us to pack a bag and everything. And, you know, obviously no one in the family could do anything. My cousin, my tío, Swaley, can't do anything. They have to abide. So we pack a bag, we leave, and we're outside. Everybody's crying. I'm like emotionless at this time. Excuse me. Everybody's crying because we know we're being taken to a whole nother state and all that. So I don't. Everybody's crying, and then I hear howling in the background, and it's coming from our house, and that's Susie. And I was like, hey, can I asked the cops, can I say bye to my dog? And they're like, no, we're leaving right now. And that's when I start bawling. And everybody's, oh no, it's gonna be okay. We're gonna figure this out. And I'm not upset that I'm leaving them. Part of me is like, I'm okay with leaving them. I have no emotional attachment or remorse for leaving. Um, so I started bawling because of Susie, because even at that time, she is still my everything. We end up leaving that night. They had gotten us McDonald's. On the car ride, we had fallen asleep, spilled. They got us McChickens. Me and my sister loved those at the time. Still, when they were $1, not when they're like $4 or $5. When they still had a dollar menu in McDonald's, we get a McChicken, some fries, and a ice cream. We ate the fries and the McChicken. That on both ends of us, the ice cream falls as we're sleeping, and spills on the cop car. Um, the cops said no worries about it. They bring us to this house, and they knock on the door. Two ladies open, and I shit you not, which still makes me feel some type of way about this, but it's very understandable. It's been almost, at that point, I was turning 12 and I was just entering the seventh grade. So, yeah, I was in sixth grade. I was just um, turning 13. I was 12. And two women opened the front door to this house, one of them being my mom. I shit you not, I did not know who was my mom. Um, and yeah, so I didn't know who during the when they brought us up, me and my sister. It was my mom and my tia or titi um, that was there. They greeted us both, um, and that's when I've met my mom for the first time in about 7 to 8 years. Yeah, from never meeting her or talking to her on the phone. 7 to 8 years. Um, and some of you might think like, oh, why didn't my mom ever find me? She did. She hired people. John stayed off radar very much, and every time he did get caught by the cops, we ended up moving. I noticed that was another thing. Um, for whatever reason that might be, even if it was just pulled over, we'd end up moving. So pretty much moved out, and around every single year. So it's gonna be hard to track somebody. Every school year I was in a new school. Um, and then she never knew where my grandmother lived because my father would never allow her to know. Like, it would be always at dark, and at night and in the woods you can't really see what's going on. Even and they never picked up their phone or anything like that. So yeah, it was very hard for her to find us. And God will it, we did end up seeing her. It was rough, but we did. That's where I also met one of my closest friends, which is also my cousin, AJ. He is a streamer. Um, Pretty funny dude, honestly. Very outgoing, in my opinion. Um, that's where I also met my older brother again, uh, for the first time in 7 to 8 years. Um, and yeah, we went through the court process for that day. Since it was also reported, he ended up winning because the his lawyer was like, "Oh, you get nose." I remember this was the final day. They had a question to me during that court process, and they were like, "Oh, so the lawyer asked me." I was on stand. "Oh, you get nosebleeds a lot," and I was like, "Yeah, I do." He's like, especially when he asked, "You get nosebleeds in the summer a lot, especially when it's hot and humid." I was like, "Yeah." And then they basically, to the pool of blood I had, they were saying John never hit me. There was no bruises or anything because this was months later and I had healed, and my sister. And they're saying to the blood that was there that it was due to a nosebleed because it was the middle of the summer. And so he won that. He never fought to, um, what is it, see us after that. He stopped showing up to court. Um, and this is when I was 12. I am now 25. So this was 13 years ago. And for the last 13 years, I have been living with my mom. Well, until I moved um, out a few years ago, like 3 years ago. Yeah, 3 4 years ago. Wow, that's a long time. And so, yeah, that's the main gist of it. And that is, oh, this brings me to a really good point. Um, my mom had a boyfriend, and he had asked me how it came to be, and I told him this similar story, very very short version of it though. What was it? It was, and he had said, "You have a story to tell that could help a lot of people um, that are in similar situations, because it's true. Like, a lot of kids could be in similar situations that I am, and you never know. No one at school ever knew. I never like gave it away or anything like that. A lot of people had said, even in my uh, new school, when I started living with my mom, I got bullied because of the fact I was a very nice kid. I was very outgoing. Very, I was nice and kind to everybody. No one would have ever guessed that story. Um, so he said, "You have a story to tell, and there could be others out there like me going through similar situations, and it doesn't have to be like that." And so when he told me that, I did want to do stuff like that, but I was always too scared to do anything about it. Um, and so here I am. And so that's part of the reason why I want to do this. I want to give my life as a roadmap and not have everybody agree to what I have to say, but to think for themselves. As I tell all my friends, I could give really good advice, which I believe I tend to do, but not every advice fits that person. So you need to, if I was to give advice, I always tell people, contemplate what I have to say and see if it fits you. And maybe that leads you to an answer that actually fits your situation much better. Um, and yeah, because I've been given advice, I tried it out and it didn't work out. Um, and that's where I came up with the thing of give advice, but always tell somebody, contemplate it to see if it fits you. And so that's why I want to do this. I want to, hopefully, one of the biggest things is I hopefully reach out to my younger sister Maria. Somehow this gets out to her, and we can finally be a family again. She was born in 2007, it's 2024. Um, she'd be about 15. Yeah, she'd be about 15, right? No, 17. She'd be 17. She'd be 17 years old. And if this reaches out to her to get that big, I would love for that to happen. Um, One of the biggest regrets is, or things I tend to think about, and is I wanted to be that type of older brother that, you know, protected his family, his sisters. Because I think I did that in some ways, but in some other ways, I did not do that. And, you know, that does not sit well with me. So I try to be that older brother, that strong person for the people in my life, because I remember when I wasn't. That's not the type of person I would want to be, and that's not the type of person I would want other people to be, where they regret not standing by or protecting the people that they care about. Especially if you're an older brother, or even a younger brother, or son, or a father. Um, that's not something I would want somebody to live with. So one of the reasons is to reach out to my younger sister Maria. Hopefully one day, very soon, that would happen. Um, and to give my life as a roadmap so people don't have to make mistakes, and they could get some part of wisdom that I might have learned or other people will learn from joining in on this. I would want to build a community where it's safe for people to talk, express themselves, bounce around ideas and such. Which I might open a Patreon soon once I learn how to figure that out, which that community can be built. And it would have also exclusive stuff that can't mentioned in this, going into more details at certain things and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, I hope that this starts to build some traction. Um, and I thank God that I finally gained the courage to start doing this. Um, and I hope to get better with speaking as I do this as well, because that's also one of the things I want to get better at, speaking to people. Uh, like some of my favorite speakers are Eric Thomas, George Janko, E.T. E.T.'s like one of my favorite. E.T.'s Eric Thomas. He calls himself the hip hop preacher. One of my first videos was of him speaking. I still remember that video. Um, Very, very great speaker. Um, so yeah, those are some of my favorite speakers coming up. David Goggins, of course, when it comes to like physical fitness and such. So thank you guys for listening. Hope you guys have a great day, and catch you next time.